Good morning, YouTube. Welcome to the Reptile Barn. Quick video for you today, just something I've been thinking about. How big should my ball python be? So, this is something that comes up quite a bit because there's a whole bunch of reasons that you need to know how big is your ball python. And then people start thinking, well, how big should my ball python be? For example, we are breeders, right? How big does your ball python need to be to breed? How large of a prey item do you need for a certain size of ball python? How large of an enclosure do you need for a certain size of ball python? Even things like how big of a hide box, how big should the water bowl be? Is it safe for my little kid at a certain size? So I want to address this. First off, ball pythons seem to have a very wide natural range of sizes. What I mean is, even in nature, if you were to go out and look for ball pythons in the wild, you would see mature breeding adults, some of them half of the size of Sally here, and some of them significantly larger. They have a very wide range in nature, right? Now, there's some things in the pet trade that they're not deceitful, but they can be misleading. For example, you will hear constantly that your ball python female needs to be 1,500 grams in order to breed, okay? So people start to think, oh, a full-grown female ball python is 1,500 grams, and that's when she's ready to breed. That's just not true. Not at all. You'll hear, males can breed significantly younger than that and smaller. They only need to be, some people will say 600 grams, some people say 800 grams, some people say 300 grams, which is too small in my opinion. But the point is, the ball python does not know how much it weighs. It just knows how it feels. It knows what it wants. It's got hormones and genetics and environmental cues helping it to make its decisions, and that's all it knows. It doesn't have this idea of, I must reach a certain weight before I breed, or I can't eat that rat because it's 6 grams larger than the chart online says. It doesn't know, right? Now, if you have a ball python this size and her hide box is this big, she knows she can't fit in that hide box, right? So it's not a very good hide box. Whereas if you have this much bedding in the bottom of the tub that she can burrow down into if she wants, she knows she can do that. And just as an aside, something I've found just as an observation with my reptiles is that a reptile feels secure, one, if it's hiding, but two, if it knows that it could hide if it wanted to, right? Even in nature, you'll see animals basking out in the open, but only a few inches away from the entrance to their burrow. As long as they feel like they can get away really quickly, they feel pretty secure. Anyways, that's just an aside. So, back to Sally here, or Fat Sally as I like to call her. Look at her body. She's a large ball python. Certainly not the largest I've seen. Right now, she's not even the largest one I have, but she's a big girl. She's older. She's probably at least 10 years old. We got her from another breeder, and she'd already been bred many times. But and of course, as most of you know, reptiles don't really stop growing. They don't have a gene that completely inhibits growth after a certain point, but they do slow down after sexual maturity. So she's a big girl. She is about 3,500 grams, and she eats pretty big meals. But there are a lot larger ball pythons than her. There are also ball pythons half her size, or even less than that, who have successfully bred and laid eggs. And I'm talking about females here, right? I want to talk about food real quick. Another rule of thumb that's out there that just bothers me, you'll see some people say, feed a ball python a meal that is 10% of its body weight. Some people will say 8% of its body weight. Some people will say 15% of its body weight. Well, I feel like that is kind of ignoring what your ball python itself wants, and also, scientifically speaking, a young ball python needs more food per mass than a full-grown adult because it's growing. It's putting a huge amount of calories towards growth, right? Whereas this girl is not. Now, during the breeding season, she's going to want to increase her food because she's building eggs inside of her body. But typically, she just doesn't need nearly as much. So, yeah, if you have a hatchling ball python and you're roughly estimating 10, maybe even 15% of its body weight, that's a pretty big meal. But it can handle it, certainly. But 15% of her body weight would be an absolutely massive rat, right? We're talking a 350 to 400 and something gram rat. That is absolutely humongous. And she just doesn't need that. Whereas, a 100-gram baby ball python could happily take a 10-gram mouse. Does that make sense? So you have to use your head. You can't just, unfortunately, you can't look at what all these people are saying online and say, oh, that's what they said, so that's what I'm going to do. Some people will tell you what the shape of your ball python's body should look like. Does the spine have a peak? Is it well rounded? Well, it depends on the body type of your ball python. There's some extremes that you can look for. If you feel your snake and it doesn't feel firm to your touch, if it's really squishy, there's too much fat on your snake. If the ribs are showing, the spine is all peaked out, then you need to feed your snake a lot more. It's way too hungry. But in general, if your snake is eating decently and it's exercising decently, it's going to be healthy, right? If you're feeding really low quality rodents that were not being fed good quality food themselves, you might get some nutrition problems in your ball python. If you're really underfeeding or really overfeeding, you're going to get some problems. But these are reptiles. They are built for extreme variation in their food intake. And within a fairly large range, you're going to be taking good care of your snake. If your snake never gets to 3,500 grams and like 4.5 feet long, like this girl is, that's okay. She's an exceptionally large individual. But you might also get a snake, maybe with some Volta blood in it, or just a really big snake that's 5,000 grams or 6,000 grams. It's twice her size. That's great too, as long as she's not, roly-poly with tons of fat. My point is just, I feel like we as keepers have to use our heads a little more. These care sheets online are great. Forums are great because lots of us are beginners. And, I am no longer a beginner in ball pythons, but I'm not an expert. There's lots of things that I want help with. And then there's other species that I would love to get into that I am a complete newcomer to. I need help. I need to see some care sheets. I need to get advice from people. But if it goes completely against what I know and what I believe about reptiles, I'm going to second guess it. I'm going to question it. Even if most people are in agreement, I'm still going to question it. It doesn't mean I'm going to throw their advice out the window, but I'm not just going to blindly do something with my snake or lizard or whatever because a lot of people told me to. I'm not going to do that. So how large should your ball python be? Well, it should be however large it is genetically predisposed to be. So again, let's take a look at her body. Look at her head size, look at her length. I consider her a very healthy snake. Because she's been fasting, she is on the skinny side of what I like to see in my adult females. Okay? So their age and gender play in to how large they should be, how big they should look, how heavy they should be, all that stuff. And to me, she's about as thin as I would like her to get because she's been off of food. She's not been building follicles this year. She's taken it off here, just totally fine. So I don't expect her to get all big and bulky like they do when they have eggs in them. So she looks great. She looks healthy. She looks happy. When she comes back on feed, she's going to get quite a bit bigger than this. At her peak, she's about a 4,200 gram snake. Okay? So that's just for reference. That's about 700 grams larger than she is right now. They fluctuate body weight a lot. Now, I know some people do too, but normally an adult human who their exercise and their eating and their sleeping is all the same day after day after day, they're not going to fluctuate weight that much. But a ball python in 1 year's time is going to put on a huge amount of weight and lose a huge amount of weight. Some reptiles, it's even more extreme than that. I've been reading a lot about savanna monitors. There's a really cool website like Savmon. I don't remember what we'll put a link there maybe, but they were saying how in the wild these savanna monitors will go 6 months sometimes without eating, and they're just skin and bones by the end, and that's totally natural for them. And then the wet season comes on, they kind of perk back up and they eat like crazy, and they just bulk right up again. But that's normal. So the reason I'm talking about this and I'm going on and on and on about it is because so many people will get their ball python and it will stop eating, for example. And they're like, oh my gosh, I did something wrong. And they're online, and some people are like, I know it happens a lot, but it's not normal. Yes, it is normal. It is part of their biology. They fast and they lose a lot of weight when they fast sometimes. Now, if again, you have to know your snake. I have had the benefit of I've had this girl for 5 years almost. So I've kind of been able to measure, and we do record their weight over time. If she started to lose weight in a way that was not in accordance with her history, I would be concerned. But if it follows the same arc every year, I'm not concerned in the slightest. There's something I've been telling people recently. I'm like, I'm starting to embrace that ball pythons fast because it saves me some money on their food, right? And I don't mean to be, taking things lightly, because I know people get really concerned when their animal is not eating, and I'm not trying to, make fun of anybody, but they should be treated differently than a mammal. If I always say, if my dog went several days without eating, I would be freaking out. We'd be at the vet. I would be asking for x-rays, wondering what was wrong. If my snake goes several months without eating, at this point, other than recording, last weight and the last time they ate and making sure I have a basic idea of it, I don't even notice anymore if an adult snake isn't eating. So that's kind of why I'm getting into this weight thing. We obsess over it, especially as breeders. Some people are weighing each individual rat or mouse that they're feeding off. That's crazy to me. I buy from really reputable places online, Perfect Prey, Rodent Pro, and their sizing is very accurate. Every rat in a medium package is going to be within 20 grams of each other. So I'm not going to sit there and weigh and be like, well, this one was 112.5 grams, but this one was only 108.5 grams. I'm not going to do that. And I'm sorry if someone out there is upset by that and thinks that I'm neglecting my animals, but I don't think it's that important. As long as you have a real solid idea of what you're feeding your snake and that it's a healthy rat that's going into it and about the size of it, you're good to go.
Well,
right?
It's not like they have scales in the wild or anything.
Right. And there is a school of thought that I actually agree with, where when they go to feed their snake, they basically they do the opposite of what breeders do. Breeders want everything to be regular, scheduled, and predictable. So you feed your snake every 7 days. You feed it the exact same species, a rat in this case, the exact same size. A medium rat's kind of a typical size for an adult ball python. And every 7 days of that snake's life in your existence, other than when it's fasting, it's going to be offered this food, right? Frozen thawed every single time, or live every single time. Just totally regimented. This other school of thought says, if you want your snake to eat in a more natural way, feed it in a more natural way. Drastically change up your schedule. Feed it 3 days after you just fed it, just to switch it up, and then maybe go 2 weeks, and then feed it 2 prey items in one go, and then switch from mice to rats. And if you have access to other prey items, switch between things. We talk about how snakes get fixated on one prey item. Well, that's because we only offer one prey item, and they get so used to it from the time they come out of their egg. They only offered one thing. You try and switch it up, and they're like, I don't want that, right? Or you offer them something they like the taste of better, and they're just going to fixate on that. Whereas if this snake doesn't ever know when its next meal is coming because the schedule and the type of prey is just drastically different all the time, the idea is it's going to be more likely to eat and not fast. unless, it's got eggs in it or something. Of course, they're just going to fast anyways. Anyway, there's a whole lot of things I could talk about that all have to do with the weight of a snake. Things like, what do they look like? Sometimes I can tell my snake is putting on or losing weight just by what they look like. And it's not even drastic amounts, but they look different when they're building follicles. The part of their body, is if it's up towards the upper third of their body or the middle or the last third of their body, different things might be going on. If it's right in the middle of their body, it's probably just a big rat. There's something that they call, I can't remember what it is, when they're about to poop. The back end of the snake, right towards the tail, right towards the vent, gets really swollen and kind of squishy, and it just usually is an indicator that they're within a few days of a bowel movement. Whereas if it's kind of up a little higher than that, maybe it's a female that's building follicles. If you just fed your snake, you're going to see a little bit of a bulge. Hopefully you're not feeding it such a huge meal that there's this massive ball in the middle of its body. But the look of an adult snake is different from the look of a juvenile. And that's one of the things I watch for as a breeder. If I have a young female that I'm hoping, gets big enough to safely breed, hey, big girl, and I want to breed her that year, and I'm feeding her really well, and I'm like, well, she's borderline. I'll look at her body. If she looks like a real lean, trim, fit snake, more like I would expect the males to be, I might not breed her. Whereas if she starts to look thick set and bulkier and more powerful, more just a larger bodied, heavy bodied snake, even if her weight isn't up, super, super high, if that's the look of her body, to me, that's a good sign. That's kind of a sign of a sexually mature female, is that certain look to her. And some people might be listening to this, be like, I don't know what you're talking about. You're crazy. This is just what I have been looking for in my snakes. Other people have totally different things they look for that work really well for them. So if this is something you worry about, go around to lots of channels here on YouTube, or look up different articles from bigger, really experienced breeders, and look for things that work for you. But that's just something that I look for, is what does their body look like? I never expect my males to get that look. I want my males to always look a little bit more trim. But my females, they seem to get girthy when they're fully mature and ready to go. And regardless of what weight they are, they might only be 1,500 grams, or they might not get that look until they're 3,000 grams. Totally depends on the individual snake. Now, last thing before I go, I'm sorry, this has rambled on much longer than I expected, but the last thing I wanted to say is the adult weight of your snake is really, truly is largely genetic. So this girl here, who's pretty big, and in the off season, in the summer, she gets even bigger, her babies are generally going to be big, right? They're getting big genetics. They're big boned, if you will. I have an ultra male who's a regular sized male. I have a banana pied male who's kind of on the smaller end. And then I have a desert ghost male, Greg. And he's a big male. He's over 2,000 grams most of the year, sometimes well over. For a male, that's pretty big, right? And consistently, those desert ghost babies are the biggest babies we get because they got a big dad. And even right out of the egg, when there's no possibility of I've just kind of fed them more or something like that, just right out of the egg, he's given 85-gram babies, whereas a smaller baby from a different clutch might only be 60 grams or so. Both perfectly healthy, hatch no problem. They thrive, long-lived, I hope, snakes, but different genetics coming from different sized parents, and they come out different sizes. Anyway, so I don't want people, I have had people say, my snake is already 6 months old and it's only X amount of grams. And I saw online that a 6-month-old snake should be 300 grams larger than mine is. I'll bet the breeder I bought from was starving this snake. I hope not. And I also assume not. Are there breeders out there who are just in it for the money? Probably, yeah. That doesn't make any sense because it's not a particularly lucrative field, but I'm sure, yes, there are breeders out there that that's what they're doing. And so they're like, well, I'm only going to feed well the snakes that I'm going to keep for myself. The ones I'm going to sell, I'm going to put them on basically a starvation diet. That probably exists. There's scumbag people out there. But a successful breeder who's been doing it for a long time, I just don't see how you could be that kind of person and be successful for a long period of time. Maybe it does happen. I don't know all these breeders, but I just I don't want you to jump to that conclusion if your snake isn't the size you would expect at that age. Um, I have several times gotten twin ball pythons. They're tiny. I've had like a 22-gram hatchling that takes twice as long to get up to adult size as a normal, even a sibling from the same clutch. And so even though the sibling is only 50 grams larger than it when they hatch, that snake was just small. It was tiny. It's only eating teeny little pinky mice or even chopped up pinky mice because it's a little snake. And it takes a long time for those tiny meals to add up to a bigger snake. So you don't know what the origins of this snake were unless you ask the breeder. If you have a concern, please ask the breeder. Because if they're shady, they're going to avoid you. They're going to try not to give you a straight answer. And then you might be like, don't buy from this guy. But they might just be like, oh yeah, that egg was a boob egg. You know, the eggs that only part of it was properly calcified. So the embryo inside was relegated to just one small little side. The yolk wasn't as big. There wasn't as much albumin. It's just a smaller baby snake. Totally healthy. Perfectly good eater. No issues whatsoever. It's just a little guy. If you bought that snake and you're like, why isn't it as big as its brother? Well, because its egg wasn't as big as its brother's egg. That's it. That's the only reason. So do use your head. If you have a concern about your snake, I'm not telling you to just bury your concerns and trust the breeder blindly. That is not my message here at all. I hope no one is taking that from it. All I'm saying is that the weight of a snake has hundreds of variables, and we can't control for all of them. We don't even know all of them. We certainly haven't done the genome of a ball python yet. So we don't know everything that controls for weight. So use your head, enjoy your snake at whatever size it is. Some people are like, I want the biggest possible ball python. I'm like, man, I'll get you a big one I think will turn out really big, but if it doesn't turn out as big as you thought, are you going to be disappointed in your animal? Are you going to not love this animal and take care of it like you should because it's not this big, awesome snake? If you want a giant snake, get a bigger snake species. Don't just, you know what I mean? Anyway, that's all. Thank you for bearing with me during this late night ramble, which is actually going to come out for you guys in the morning. But thank you for listening and watching and supporting our channel. I hope that you at least enjoyed looking at this big, awesome snake. And until next time, we're the Reptile Barn.